Hello YouTube, Got a Radio Moscow here again with another beer review for you, as is usual, continuing on with this German series of beer reviews of course, and today we're going to visit the fourth brewery in Heidelberg today. Obviously Heidelberg is where I'm studying at the moment in Germany. I've already done videos for the Brauerei zum Klosterhof Heidelberg, which is the monastery brewery in Ziegelhausen. I've done one for the Vetters brewery and one for the Kulte Brauerei, and these are the two sort of brew pubs, if you like, the small batch breweries in Heidelberg. But today we're going to visit the sort of massive brewery, if you like, in Heidelberg. These guys brew in the Pfaffenground district of Heidelberg. So today we're going to have a look at the Heidelberger Bock beer, and this is one that I often drink when I'm out on the town actually. This is a nice sort of drinking beer. It's a little bit heavier and stuff, and it kind of gives, it's good for you when you're out drinking socially, this one I feel. But as is usual in my beer reviews, I'll just take you through a little bit of a history of the brewery and tell you a little bit about the beer itself. But as I always say, if you are simply just interested in the tasting of this beer, then go on towards the latter part of the video and you will catch that particular segment. But anyway, many of you will have heard of the Reinheitsgebot of 1516, which is the strict code by which most German beer is brewed. Of course, within Germany it's not illegal to brew against the Reinheitsgebot or out with the Reinheitsgebot, but you can't say on the bottle if that it is brewed in accordance with the Reinheitsgebot if you haven't. So it's just a sort of false advertising thing. It's not actually illegal to brew out with the Reinheitsgebot, of course. But there is actually in Heidelberg a stricter code that was issued in 1603, and it's a lot more strict than the Reinheitsgebot. There's actually further regulation on the actual brewing process and on the raw materials that are used in the beer. And 150 years after the introduction of this law, the Heidelberger Brauerei was born in 1753. But by 1816 there were apparently a total of 38 breweries operating in Heidelberg. But the original property of the Heidelberger brewery changed many times, and it was actually continually growing over this period. But it was taken over by the Kleinlein brothers in 1820, and at that time the property was called the Kleinlein, and it consisted of a residential house, a 3-storey brewery, a steam engine, a refrigerated ship for the river, of course, the Neckar that runs through Heidelberg here. They had a stables, a malts house, a rock cellar, which is where they would store the beer, of course. And at this time they only brewed from September until May, and then the extra production was actually embedded in the rock cellars in the castle, and then they would use ice from the Neckar River and from the castle pond, of course, and they would cool the beer and then store it until the summer. So quite an interesting little history behind the actual foundation of the brewery there. But back in these early days, all of the hops and ingredients were locally cultivated, and the brewers actually had to rely on experience and observations to get the brew to come out correctly, although of course nowadays they rely on modern technology. But in 1870 the brothers brought another property in Bergstrasse, number 91. I think this is actually very close to where I live in Heidelberg. But they actually built a new brewery there which became their main base. But the secret of their success was apparently brewing a light beer in the Viennese style. Although unfortunately after building this new brewery, the Kleinlein brothers struggled with the finances of the brewery, having built such a costly facility, if you like, and they sold the brewery to engineer Louis Scholl, and the brewery was renamed Heidelberg Aktenbrauerei Kleinlein Heidelberg. And then Karl Kleinlein, one of the brothers, he actually remained as the brewmaster and as a very active board member until the year 1897. But by 1900 only 6 of the Heidelberg breweries remained, and that was Kleinlein, Schrodel, Angels, Golden Keg, Crown and Ziegler. And over the following 20 years many of these breweries were brought over or shut down, and so by 1920 only the Heidelberg Aktenbrauerei and the Angels Brauerei were left. But the progress of the Heidelberger Aktenbrauerei over this period was non-stop. In 1897 they appointed their first ice cream maker. This is quite a common thing in Germany actually, that the breweries do have an ice cream maker historically. And then in 1912 they purchased their first motor cars for beer deliveries, and they also set up new steam engines that year for the brewery as well. But by this time the Aktenbrauerei was actually one of the largest breweries in Baden, the state of course where Heidelberg is, of course, Baden-Württemberg these days. The two counties were merged, if you like. And it was actually the leading local brewery in Heidelberg, and I believe it still is to this day. But in 1914, Heidelberger used the castle image as their trademark for the first time, and this has stayed with the brewery despite numerous changes in ownership. But the brewery changed hands once in 1934, and then once again in 1968 when it was brought by the Schultheiss brewery from Berlin, and this signalled the end of independence for the brewery. But the brewery was, however, allowed to continue to operate in Heidelberg almost completely independently, if you like. But in 1985 the brewery was renamed Heidelberg Brauerei AG, and then this was finally acquired by Werner Kindermann, and then it joined his restaurant chain, of course, after that. But in 2005 the brewery was taken over by Michael Mack, and then became the Heidelberger Brauerei as its name is today. And apparently it's one of the few existing private breweries and the oldest surviving brewery in Heidelberg to this day, of course. And Heidelberg, as you might know, is a very, very historic town, the oldest university in Germany, where I'm sort of studying or researching at the moment, of course. But he has basically, Michael Mack has steered the brewery in the direction of environmental sustainability and sustainable economic growth, and today they actually brew it in the Pfaffengrauen district in a very modern facility, apparently one of the most modern facilities in Europe, and they use all the raw materials from the local region. But just to tell you a little bit about the other beers that the brewery do, as I mentioned earlier in the video, there's the 1603 Heidelberger beer order, and they actually brew a beer that's completely done in regulation with this beer order, and I do have that one. It's the Heidelberger 1603 Pils, and I'll review that for you at a later date. And there's also an alcohol-free version of this, of course, as well. They have their premium export beer, they have their Crystal, Dunkel and Hefeweizen Helles beers. All three, as I've mentioned, you get these three varieties of Hefeweizen beer in Germany. They have the Original, the Pils, the Dunkel, the Naturtrub, which is just a sort of a Keller beer, unfiltered, of course. They have their Lenzenbock and also their Winter beer as well, and that beer was beautiful. I had that on tap when I first arrived in Heidelberg, but I couldn't find it in bottle, unfortunately. But that's their beers for you there. I'll put the brewery website in the video description there, so if you are interested in finding out more about the Heidelberger Brewery, as always, the link to the video is in the video description there. But let's get on with the tasting of this guy and see how we get on. I'll just bring up the camera and let you have a little look at the bottle label here. This one's quite cool. I've actually never found out why there is actually a goat on this one. I'm really not sure. But I don't know if Drauf maybe is a sort of slang term for goat. As far as I remember it, like Drauf just means it, but maybe that's why the goat's on it. I'm really not sure about this one. I asked around and nobody seemed to know. But you can see there's the top label, it says BockDrauf, and then you can see the Heidelberger thing on it here. Maybe on the back you can see the sort of Heidelberger crest, if you like. There's no sort of crest on the top of this one here, but let's get this guy opened and get on with the tasting here. As I mentioned in my last videos, I always like seeing how big these guys pop. So I've drunk this beer a lot of times and I know this one pops quite well, so that's a good one. That's what I've been looking for in the last few videos, is a good pop on the beer like that. But let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting here. Nice big sort of off-white head coming on this one. This is actually a Heidelberger sort of glass or stein, I think. I asked the Germans if they call these steins and they said no, so I'm not going to call it a stein anymore. But as you can see, it's a really nice looking beer, a nice big off-white head on it there. I would call that a beige head, to be honest. Very, very foamy, and as you can see, it's a really nice sort of, it's actually a dark reddish ruby amber colour actually. I think you can see that on the camera there as far as I can see, but it's a really nice looking one. There's some big bubbles sticking on the bottom, but quite a bit of carbonation going to the top. That's easily a 2-finger head, and that's going down. I'll just try and get the last little bit into the beer there. This is the typical head you want on a German beer. They always like having their sort of curved heads on the top of these. I'll just get the last little bit and we can seal this up. As I've mentioned in my last videos as well, this is how the Germans can tell if you're foreign, if you don't seal up your beer. But as you can see, really nice looking beer, and this is one of the ones that I've mentioned I really like to drink when I'm out in Heidelberg. But in terms of the aroma with this one, a lot of brown sugary malts. It's actually a little bit of a roasted caramel character to it, I would say. But it's got a little bit of a kind of nutty and woody aroma, I would say. It almost smells, it has a little hint of like the Innocent Gun beers that you find from Scotland, of course. It does smell a little bit like it's aged, but it isn't. But it does have a nice sort of woody and nutty aroma, but a nice little bit of the kind of roast caramel, I would say. And there maybe is just a little hint of dark fruits, and of course when you have a little bit more oxidation sometimes in these beers, you can get the impression of dark fruit. So I think mainly this one, there is just a little hint of it when your sort of smell dissipates a little bit, but it's mainly the caramel malts with the roasted character and just a little bit of sort of nutty and woody element to this. But let's give this guy a taste and see how we go on. You can see the head is just sort of dissipating a little bit now. Yeah, big roasted caramel malts as you take this one in. It's interesting to actually think about this beer a bit more rather than just drinking it in the pub. yeah, big roasted caramel malts. The actual roasted character is quite a little bit more prominent, I would say, when you're drinking it than it would appear in the aroma. I mean, with Schlenkerla and things, you really smell the roasted character, but this one is a little bit less obvious in the aroma, but it really comes out on the opening when you take it in. You can taste the woody character, the sort of nice aged woody and nutty character on the sort of back of the mouth, if you like, or on the top of the mouth after it kind of gets past the sort of opening taste of the beer. But it actually adds a really nice element to it, this one. And it's interesting, like I say, to review a beer I've had a number of times, but this one you do get a nice really roasted caramel thing. The roast character, as I mentioned, is a little bit more prominent and the aroma lets you away with thinking, but you have that nice woody character with maybe just a little bit of vanilla coming in, as you would expect with sort of woody and aged character in there. It comes in just after you get past that roasted character at the start there. Maybe just a little tiny hint of fruit, but it is mainly a mix of that roasted caramel, maybe a little bit of a bread character in there, and a sort of and that nice woody and vanilla thing there. Maybe there is just a little hint of the fruit right at the end, but it is a really prominent roasted caramel flavour, I would say. It actually almost has just a little hint, a little bit of resemblance to some of the sour character that you get in Belgian beer, just a little hint of that. It reminds me of some of these Belgian beers. It's been a long time since I've actually had one, being in Germany of course, but you do get a little sense of Belgian beer about this guy. But definitely a nice big blast of roasted caramel with some nice woody and vanilla elements there, exactly what you would expect from a Bock beer, to be honest. It actually is a little reminiscent of a Scotch ale, but a little less fruity actually. A really interesting beer, and as I mentioned, it has a little hint of Belgian character to it. In terms of the mouth with this one, it's definitely a full-bodied beer, a nice oily and sort of, maybe, I don't know if velvety is the right word to describe it, but it's a nice oily mouthfeel to this one. It's not such an easy drinking beer. It does have a nice bit of alcohol warmth to it, and that kind of adds to the woody character and gives the caramel a bit more of an oomph, if you like, in it. It's the nice alcohol warmth on this one. It's a 6.8% Bock beer. I think I forgot to mention that. It's 6.8%, so you do get a little bit of alcohol warmth from it, and it just adds to the flavour. It brings the malty character and the roasted characters out really well. But there's medium carbonation on this one, and it's slightly watery at the same time, so it is full bodied, but it does have a nice little bit of refreshing element to it, I would say. So you've got a nice little bit of Bock character, you've got a nice little bit of warm character to it, but at the same time it does give you a little bit of refreshing. Actually, it reminds me a little bit of the Einstück Doppelbock, which they have that nice soft water, so it makes it kind of refreshing at the same time, and this does have a little bit of an element to it, but obviously this guy is a lot more malty than the Einstück Doppelbock, I would say. But anyway, I hope you found this beer review informative. I'll be revisiting the Heidelberger Brauerei for their other beers in the coming weeks. I've got a couple of them on my shelf there, so I can get on with these videos now because I've made the notes and stuff. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. Please let me know in the comment section if you have tried this one yourself. It's always interesting to hear other people's thoughts on it. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. But I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you with another German beer review soon. Cheers.